Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar today. Where are we on supply chain visibility? Visibility as a word is bandied about in supply chain strategy, but how is it defined in practice? On this webinar today, you'll hear from supply chain practitioners and how they're defining and executing supply chain visibility strategies. Before I hand this over to Laura and the panel, there are a few things I want to cover with you. We are recording today's session and we'll post it to our on-demand webinars page. You can visit our website to listen to this or any of our other webinars. Additionally, we will send the recording to everyone within the next 24 hours. We encourage you to share the presentations and the recording with anyone in your organization who may be interested. If you have any questions, you can set up a call with Laura or myself for a discussion. We want to hear your questions about our findings. Please post to our Q&A function to the left of your screen. We've left time at the end of the webinar to address your questions. Finally, we will be live tweeting the webinar, so if you would like to join the social media conversation, you can use the hashtag SCIWebinar and at SC Insights LLC during the event. Now let me introduce our host, Laura Ciceri, founder of Supply Chain Insights. As an enterprise strategist, Laura focuses on the changing face of enterprise technologies. Her research is designed for the early adopter seeking first mover advantage. She comes to the stage with over 40 years of diverse supply chain experience. Welcome, Laura.
Hey, thank you so much, Helen. And it's great to see that we have 300 people that have signed up for the webinar globally. I think it's very much like this picture that we have on supply chain visibility. While we talk about visibility, most people cannot see clearly with their data. And I think that's driven a lot of interest in the market. So I look forward to doing this today. And I'm joined by Bharat, and a story about how I met Bharat. I write for LinkedIn, and he sent me a LinkedIn request and said I would really love to do a visibility webinar with you. So Bharat, tell the group a little bit about yourself and why you're so passionate about visibility.
Yeah, hi Laura. Hello to everybody listening on the webinar. So about myself, I'm a unique mix of technology, supply chain, and business, I would say, in the life science and healthcare domain. And why I'm passionate about visibility is because I really think that the old saying of you cannot manage what you cannot measure is really true. And I see a lot of companies out there, a lot of senior executives still struggling with getting access to basic information about the performance of their company or their team or their division within seconds or minutes. It's still, in this day and age, it's still not easy to get an answer to what's my sales globally right now across all the different countries or markets, or what's my on-time info, or what's my back order. So my passion comes from the fact that these things should be basic. These things should be something we conquer together as an industry, so that healthcare, life sciences, this domain can sort of make the leap, make the technology leap to make information visible to the right person at the right time for better decision making. So that's really the reason why I wanted to be a part of this. And I'm all up for great talks on blockchain and AI and next generation innovation. But I also strongly urge the leaders out there to think about doing the basics extraordinarily well before we go chasing extraordinary things. And for me, this is the basic. This is the foundation. We have to nail this to move the needle as an industry. And I hope these webinars, have a little role to play in moving the needle. Yeah.
At Supply Chain Insights, we do these webinars monthly, and our goal is to use our research as the backdrop to have a dialogue with supply chain leaders like Bharat. Every month we invite a different set of leaders to actually help us to share insights. And when Bharat contacted me on LinkedIn, we had a dialogue about how there is no one definition of visibility and there is no one technology set. And because most business leaders think that visibility comes automatically with the implementation of enterprise resource planning that we call ERP, or advanced planning systems, which are called APS. They don't think enough about visibility. So, for example, I was talking to a major pharmaceutical company yesterday who was really working on visibility of cold chain and cold chain deviations. And then I was working with a major retailer who was working on visibility of store outages. And I was working with another company who was working on visibility of inventory shortages. Each of those companies had defined visibility slightly differently, and they hadn't really sat down to think about what visibility means. So my goal for you is to think hard about what is visibility and what are the underlying technologies and questions for you to ask. So at Supply Chain Insights, we're focused on delivering independent and actionable advice for supply chain leaders. We're a research company. We are not a consulting company. So consultants know the answers. We're trying to help companies to find the answers. And around every topic that we're studying, we see the evolution of new technologies. So in the case of visibility, as we're working with open source analytics and streaming data architectures like Apache Spark or blockchain, or the evolution of analytics for cognitive computing, we have a lot of capabilities that we can unleash. But we also do need to say, what can I do with my existing systems to be able to see visibility for basic blocking and tackling, which often will require getting into the definitions of data and data governance. And I know it's not sexy, but a lot of times people will say, let's start with the basics. And when I say, what are the basics that are really fundamental to you, they haven't really thought about it. And so they use general terms, and my guidance is, let's get specific. Now, visibility helps companies perform at the speed of business. And so, as we are trying to move supply chains, different processes move at different speeds. Something like allocation or ACP logic moves very quickly. Something like sales and operations planning moves at a different pace. So one of the things to think about in the definition of visibility systems is, what is the speed of business and what are the business flows around the requirements at the intersection of the nonlinear system we call supply chain, which there are relationships between forecast accuracy, customer service, and inventory based upon demand flows. There are interactions between channel strategies and product portfolio and supplier strategies based upon complexity. And there are real drivers around corporate social responsibility. I'm working with a number of companies that are working on visibility for fair labor, or looking at corporate social responsibility around logistics and deadhead dials. My goal in putting up this slide is, start by thinking about what is your goal and what is the speed of business, and how does that drive benefit in this complex nonlinear system, which means that normally visibility systems have got to cross over functions, and the functions are not aligned, cross over systems, and the systems often have master data issues. And we've got to say, what is the goal? What is the speed of business? And how do I progressively drive companies in terms of improved corporate performance to increase organizational potential? What are the questions I need to ask and answer? So Ross just talked about global sales or global sales growth. That could be an example, but what are the questions that you need to ask and answer to progressively move your organization up to the effective frontier? Now, we find in our research that volatility, alignment, and visibility are the top business pains. I would say that demand and supply volatility have increased. Organizational alignment has become worse. And supply chain visibility is often tossed around as a hot potato of I need better visibility, but we don't really stop and define it in terms of what is the goal, how do I manage it across systems and functions, and what is the speed of business in which visibility needs to happen. And how many visibility systems do I need? Do I need a visibility system for cold chain? Do I need a visibility system for out of stock or short shipments? Where do I need the visibility? And so there are different forms of visibility in terms of the goal. And I find that often people will make the mistake that they'll say visibility without really stepping back and thinking about the types of visibility. So in this chart, blue represents importance. In our study that we did, and we've done this study multiple times, not a lot of change over the years, not a lot of change by industry. We find that the transportation and logistics network visibility is very high in terms of importance, and the transactions within the supply chain are also very high, but the gaps there are pretty big. We also find that where people have made the most progress, and it's important, but there's small gaps at the manufacturing level, that we've made a lot of progress there. But transportation, transactions within the supply chain are very important, and we have large gaps. Likewise, of less importance, third-party logistics, third-party manufacturing. Here we're getting into network kind of interaction, materials, and inter-enterprise order management in terms of where are orders, how are orders being managed in the channel. These are all forms of visibility, and they have gaps. Bharat, can you give us some view of your organization for this data? How does this fit for you?
Yeah, first of all, fully agree with the most important two things you have, the transportation and logistics and transactions and supply chain decisions. Where I work, Merck KGaA, I think we would prioritize the other way. We would say maybe the transactions and supply chain decisions, visibility around that would be more important probably than transportation and logistics. But I think it's for us, it's the same situation that these are the two big high importance building blocks. What surprises me a bit is the high level of progress your survey indicates with manufacturing visibility, because in the last year or two at Merck, we spent a lot of time in really ramping up on manufacturing visibility. And from my interaction with folks in the industry, it felt like this was still a gap. So I'm happy to see this, but it surprises me a little bit. I'm also a little bit surprised with the first bucket you have with the inter-enterprise order management to customers. This is not so much of a problem at Merck. Maybe we managed to handle that well. I don't know. But these are the two sort of surprises. But overall, I would say this is spot on with what we're seeing.
Now, when you talk about visibility at Merck, do you find that people have clarity of the business problem, being able to think about visibility and with the goal in mind, or do you find that that's a first step to dissect what do we mean by visibility?
Well, let's say we look at the problem a little bit differently, okay? The goal at Merck is to bring the right information to the right person at the right time, okay? What you call it, whether you call it visibility, whether you call it access to information, actionable intelligence, whatever. The goal is right information to the right person at the right time. That's how we look at it. I think we have a pretty good handle of what type of visibility we need, what type of information we need to present to who and when. It's just that the complexity of this 350-year-old company operating in 70 countries brings a lot of challenge in achieving what seems on paper so simple and straightforward, getting the right information to the right person. That's more of our challenge. So I think overall with the business problem framing and understanding, we're good. With the vision of, right information delivery, we're good. But handling the complexity of this global business is where I think it's going to be a journey. It's going to continue to be a challenge, and we're working on it.
So, Bharat, one of the things that most people are surprised by when they implement ERP or they implement advanced planning is that they still have these gaps. Why do you think that is? Do you think it's because of the complexity of the global organization or just the complexity of the organization? Why do you think that we have these gaps despite the fact that over 95% of companies have ERP and advanced planning?
Well, I think first of all, ERP is very good at operational reporting in silos. Meaning, if you want to know what's my inventory at a certain plant or a warehouse, if you want to know what's your back order in a certain region, if you want to know what's your forecast looking like for a certain product in a certain market, when you're talking about these sort of siloed questions which are handled by large transactional systems like your ERP, like SAP or Oracle, or like a planning system, I think most companies are doing okay. But the moment you start to get into actionable intelligence and really using that information to make better decisions, you start to realize you have to blend the data coming from different systems. You can no longer say, I have good reporting on these separate topics and I'm happy. If you want to look at your supply chain as a whole, these operational siloed reportings just don't cut it. This is my point of view. And I also can tell you that this is where we spend most of our energy at Merck, in asking how can we bring the data from different systems together and blend them to create insights that can really make a difference and change the way people work. That's very different from saying, do I have visibility into inventory out of the box? You see what I'm saying?
I do. And what are your insights from doing that work? What would you tell others listening on the phone? What did you learn?
Well, what we learned, maybe let's take top three takeaways. One, it's hard to get the master data from different transactional systems and to harmonize them or to blend them. Okay, first of all, it's not a trivial task, and it shouldn't be taken as a project, as a very tactical thing. It's really strategic to think about blending data, how we want to blend the data, at what level, and for what purpose. It's difficult, but at the same time, it's highly rewarding, because a lot of the folks who've been in your organization for many years, who have the tribal knowledge, especially in supply chain, tend to favor Excel. And if you want to get them out of their world, Excel world, and get them to a different environment, you really need to show to them that, hey, I can do things for you that's going to be very difficult for you to do in an Excel tool, which is blending millions of rows of data across different systems. So I can guarantee that if you get into this blending journey, the results will be really impressive, and you can engage the organization to get on this journey of becoming a digital supply chain. And the third thing I would say is it's really important for the supply chain leadership to recognize the difference between operational siloed reporting versus intelligent blending for insights. And also for the management to recognize that when you speak about digital transformation, we should focus most of our energy on transformation and changing the way people work, and less on specific digital technologies. So this is for me the top three takeaways if you're looking to get into blending, and this is what I think you should expect.
Yeah, I had a great conversation yesterday with a chemical company that was struggling with the difference between digitization and digitalization. So when I think about digitization, Bharat, I think about taking data and bringing it into a digital form for usability. When I think about the digital supply chain, I think about redefining the atoms and electrons of the supply chain based upon the art of the possible. So I'm not just digitizing today's processes, but I'm really looking at what's possible. And I think there's tension here in the area of visibility between those two concepts. Any thoughts here about clarity there and your progression at Merck?
Yeah, Look, Laura, we've drawn a very clear line between what we call digitalization, which for us at Merck, and speaking maybe personally from my opinion, it's about creating new business models. It's doing business, engaging customers in a different way to really take advantage of digital. Okay, this for me is really transforming the core of the business and creating new opportunities. On the other hand, digitization, uh, for me, it's more about using digital capabilities to achieve operational improvements, operational excellence internally in an incremental, ongoing manner. Within Merck, we have separate groups that focus on these external new business model and digitalization opportunities, and we have separate groups that are focused on internal incremental improvement using digital capabilities. So for us, the difference is clear. Does that answer your question?
It does, but I think from the wider market, it is not clear. And I think that, the person I was talking to yesterday was a chemical manufacturer in Germany, and he said, in the German language, there aren't two terms, right? So that's a barrier there. But, what he said is it's really easy for the supply chain team to think about how to make today's data digital and improve today's processes, but it isn't as easy to think about the art of the possible. And I know for us, that's one of the things that you've been doing at Merck, and I'm really excited that you're going to share your story today. So I want to just move the webinar on, and then I'm going to have Ross share his story. And I want to encourage people as we talk and share that you can add your questions, and the question chat panel is at the bottom. We'll answer all questions that come in, and we really would like to make this interactive. So when we think about visibility, sometimes people say, well, okay, Laura, I hear you, but so what, who cares? What's the ROI? And, if we are just making data digital and improving the efficiency, it's easier to answer that question. If we're looking at new ways of driving visibility, so yesterday I was also talking to someone who was using blockchain for cold chain and cryptocurrency into emerging markets. That is a different definition of visibility, which requires us to really think about the art of the possible. The first point, and I think the first starting step, is say, what is visibility? There is no industry definition of visibility that fits, and there's no set of application that effectively solves all problems. So every time someone comes in and says they've got a visibility solution, I want you to have the courage to raise your hand and say, how do you define visibility? And are you moving data digitally, digitization? Or are we talking about digital supply chain transformation? Try to bracket it. Try to get it off of the PowerPoint, speak that is not specific enough. Now, the reason why I think it's important, we sit on a database of 8,000 responses over the last 6 years that we've been in business at Supply Chain Insights, and we do quantitative surveys using our LinkedIn contacts to basically study the population of supply chain. And this is a very different methodology than some other research groups that will use research panels. And when you use research panels, you don't know the company or the individual names. We know the company and the individual names in our database. We never share them. But what we're studying and what we're trying to triangulate is the choices that companies make and the impact on value. And one of the studies we've been working on is what are the factors that improve price to tangible book? So price is market price on a public market if you're a public company. And tangible book are the things that supply chain leaders care about: physical assets, the investments in capital and equipment. of 150 factors that we tried to run correlation against, and we tested type of ERP, and I'm sure you've seen all the advertisements that leaders run this, consultants, how people are organized, maturity of the team. Imagine 150 factors. We found 4 factors correlate with price to tangible book value improvement. One is an effective center of excellence, which a third of companies have a center of excellence. About 50% consider them to be effective. If a company has an effective center of excellence, which is often driving the discussion about what is visibility, what is clarity of the art of the possible, bringing in new ideas, testing new technologies. If they have an effective center of excellence in the business, they will have a higher correlation of price to tangible book. Second, sales and operations planning effectiveness. We find over 80% of companies have an S&OP process, but not all consider it effective. About 42% consider S&OP effective, and question is how aligned and how balanced is that process. But if it's an effective process, which an effective sales and operations planning process improves visibility and the tactical planning horizon, they will have a higher price to tangible book. If they have second and third tier supply visibility, inbound materials, knowledge of the locations of those suppliers, movement of transportation, there is a correlation to price to tangible book. On the other side, if there are reliability issues with suppliers and they have pain with supplier reliability, we will see a negative correlation. So that gives you some perspective on what is visibility and how to think about visibility and why it matters. And for us, what I thought we could do now is have you go through your case, if you don't mind, and what you're working on.
Yeah, no problem. Just one point to mention on what you were saying just a minute ago, Laura, about which vendors to work with. For example, or when somebody tells you they offer supply chain visibility, how do you know what you're getting? I think this is a really important point for me, for your audience, is to take a step back. Just go to Google and search for software vendors plus end-to-end supply chain visibility. For me, it's shocking how many vendors out there proudly claim that they provide real-time end-to-end visibility for faster, more informed decision making. Literally, I could build a website in 2 minutes that takes a mishmash of all these buzzwords, put it together, and I could have a company running. And this is happening today because of the lack of awareness within the industry on what exactly is supply chain visibility and how to get there. So I think that I just want to stress on the point that this kind of discussions to understand what it is and what we can get out of it is so crucial, so that we don't get on journeys with vendors that have different capabilities than what we need. And then in the end, it leaves a bad taste in the mouth and you just don't advance. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
Absolutely. And I just want to remind people as Bharat goes through his case study, please give us your questions so we can have a dialogue. Because Bharat, that's actually one of the reasons why you reached out to me on LinkedIn, was that very point, right? That, everybody says they have it, but, it doesn't come, prepackaged out of a box like people propose.
Yeah, there's 1,000 ways to skin the cat. So any vendor can come in and make a pitch to you and ask for a certain pot of money and say, we can do this for you. And then you will notice almost every vendor going through the same journey, asking your subject matter experts the same questions. It's the same story over and over again. So you really don't want to burn out the subject matter experts, because if you start a program and you lose their credibility and they don't engage, you don't get too many chances, because without the expertise of the people that are running a business through Excel and a mishmash of other tools, if they don't come to the table and you don't demonstrate that you have credibility and competence on the topic, then they might disengage. And that's a big risk, that the right brains won't come to the table, even if you find the right vendor. So I think it's worth investing time to first understand for yourself, what is the supply chain visibility? Why do I want to bring this from my organization? And then ask the question, who's most equipped to help me get there? Yeah.
Perfect. Let's hear all about what you've been doing at Merck.
Super. So I'll go a bit quick. And do I have 10 minutes, 5 minutes? What's the time, Laura?
10 minutes, if that works for you.
Okay. So what you see on the screen, GMS stands for Global Manufacturing and Supply. It's the operations group, if you will, of the biopharma business of Merck KGaA, which is a 350-year-old pharmaceutical and chemicals company headquartered in Germany with offices in 70 countries all over the world. My role is as a technology partner for this global manufacturing and supply group, particularly for the digital and for the supply chain function. And what that means is that the supply chain leadership of my company, of the biopharma business, trust my inputs and my advice and my suggestions on how to shape their digital journey to achieve their supply chain priorities and objectives. And when you look at some of the key strategic objectives we have, it's bucketed into these 5 categories. The most important thing for us is the people aspect of things, because in my company, we believe in not automating with digital to, let's say, get rid of people, but it's more to augment people, to make them more productive, to make them more efficient, to make them more successful. So people is at the core of what we do. And then you have Internet of Things, which needs no explanation. It's one of the biggest buzzwords of this decade. We have advanced analytics, which is around data science and predictive analytics and everything we're doing to go after the hairiest problems, which require deep data analytics and mining for insights. Then the bucket which we care about in the context of this conversation is the end-to-end visibility, supply chain visibility, and near real-time access to information. The last one is more automation and robotics, so that we can really make our products better, faster, higher quality, and move towards a more industrial setup. So these are the 5 strategic objectives, and we're going to zoom in to the end-to-end visibility. Next slide. Yeah, the supply chain control tower, which you saw the small animation there, that's really the cornerstone. That's a program where we're working on end-to-end supply chain visibility. So you can do the down arrow a couple of more times so we get the full slide. Yeah, that's good. So the term control tower, I think it's self-explanatory. We want one place where we get end-to-end view of what's happening with our supply chain, or really our operations, so that we can make the right decisions and more informed decisions at the right speed. So what does it entail? There's 4 pieces to this. Let's start with the vision, because this is always important. Laura, you've done webinars, you're actively speaking to the industry about autonomous supply chain. We call it self-driving supply chain, same concept. We want to get to a place where we can be more autonomous in how we predict demand and how we prescribe supply. So it's more machine-driven in enabling the human, as opposed to being a human-driven operations, so that we can be more responsive to the market. We can make we can take more intelligent decisions that are not just focused on service level in getting the drugs to the patients, but also optimized for cost, cash, and profit, which is really important for our investors. So that's the vision, to move towards a machine-driven, optimized, efficient supply chain, just like your self-driving car, which we hope will bring 70% lesser accidents, because your self-driving car doesn't drink and drive, doesn't text and drive, doesn't talk and drive. So it's the same concept of going to a machine-driven supply chain. That's the vision. Then when we look at our advanced analytics journey, that is Describe, which is really a large part of this visibility, where we're presenting information about what's happening today, what happened yesterday. Then there is Prediction, which is estimating the likelihood of a certain event. For example, what's the likelihood of a stock out for a certain product in a certain region? And then Prescribe is to actually not just predict what could happen in the future, but to propose some recommendations, some possible actions that a human can take in order to either capitalize on an opportunity or to prevent a problem before it happens. That's the buckets of analytics. Specifically speaking of end-to-end supply chain visibility, we define that as just like the reference core model. It's all about going from the supplier all the way to the customer's customer. And within the four walls of our company, it's the buckets of plan, source, make, and deliver. Now we've added return and enable, but I think the main blocks still remain as plan, source, make, and deliver. The final point is we're taking all of our different systems, bringing it into the cloud, and then we're doing the analytics on a data lake on the cloud. Okay. We have a variety of internal and external partners and providers that are a part of this equation because this is not a one-stop shop. But this is the main let's say platform for us to achieve this visibility. It's on a data lake, and it could be a whole different webinar to talk about the data lake. So I'm not going to go there. But the notion is to take data, millions of rows of data from different systems, bring it all into one environment, do the blending there, and then get the advanced insights, which then drive, hopefully, actions that can make a difference. Next slide.
Bharat, we have a couple of questions, if you don't mind. One is, what were your biggest obstacles or barriers on getting the data into the data lake and in the hands of people that need it?
Well, biggest obstacle was awareness and education, because when you say data lake, maybe now in the last couple of years, it's becoming more of a familiar word, but most of our leadership were not really highly familiar with this term. So first question was, why am I investing in this data lake? Who's swimming in this lake? Why? It's true. I've had all sorts of jokes around swimming in the lake and why do we need to do this? Is it just some buzzword? Do I need to care? So it took a lot of effort and several prototypes and pilots to show in action, this is why you need the data lake. And if you didn't have it, you can achieve these use cases. So we had to show in a very tangible way to get past this sort of lack of awareness and the mindset of saying, I don't know what this is. I don't want to invest money because I'm not hearing this from my peers. So this is the most biggest challenge, I would say, but something we managed to overcome. Another one is when you speak about visibility into suppliers, and customers, this is non-trivial. And I know, Laura, you have your network of networks, topic that you're driving. It's the same topic, if you will, in that it's very difficult to go to your suppliers and expect a variety of suppliers to provide you information that lets you get this full visibility all the way from your supplier till the end customer. And it's the same when you talk about transportation and logistics. You may have hundreds of logistics providers in different parts of the world, and not all of them are going to be digitally savvy and willing to give you information on a daily basis that you can then bring into an environment to harmonize with your data so you get the full end-to-end view. So I would say these are the top two challenges.
For us, that's great. Thank you very much. We also have a question from Pat, and your point here around blending. When we put data in a data lake, we're moving to a schema on read versus a schema on write environment, and ERA is prescriptive cognitive tool. Can you tell the group a little bit about what you mean by the term blending underneath the banner all data is in the data lake? That's a very different term than harmonization, synchronization, integration. So there's a number of questions around that.
Yeah, what I mean by blending, let's take a very simple example, okay? Let's say you're looking at a back order that your company has to a key customer who you really want to deliver the products on time, because this is a key customer that's bringing in a lot of your sales revenues. A back order to a key customer is never a good thing. And let's say you're the head of a manufacturing site and you have to fix this problem, that we have to deliver this product as soon as we can to get out of this mess, okay? Now, your order information is in your ERP system. Then your planning details is maybe in a different system. For some, it's part of SAP. For some, it's other off-the-shelf software. And that's where you're scheduling the, let's say, the orders, which are the, let's say, scheduling the batches, which are going to make the product corresponding to this order, which is now on back order. Then comes a manufacturing execution system, which is likely going to take this order and move it step by step, and it's going to produce an electronic batch record in the end. Then you have a laboratory information management system, which has the information about the testing of the samples from this batch. And then maybe you have some kind of, maybe as part of your LIMS system, some kind of lot release management or quality control that has to be done. And maybe this is where you have an issue or a deviation, which might then be logged in a change management system like TrackWise. So if you got a head of a manufacturing plant that's saying, I have a big back order, I need to fix this, then you got to trace all the way down to say, well, if that deviation that's opened on this batch that's stored in the MES system that was scheduled by this planning system, which got that information from ERP, if you can go down these levels and combine the data from different systems, then it becomes harder to quickly bring this lower level information to the top to say, hey, this is the action you're going to take to fix this back order. Don't call your right hand, your chief of staff, and wait for 1 week for 8 people to sit in a war room and create a big fat Excel. Let's blend the data from all these systems together, because we know how the data flows and how it's connected. So we can answer for you the same question the moment you have it. You follow what I'm saying as an example?
I do, but for us, I think one of the issues is people have this concept that visibility happened out of tight integrations. And data lakes and cognitive computing assume that you're doing the blending and you're reading the data in a very different way. And I think it's a very big paradigm shift. And we do have a question from Bruno, who wants to know, how long did this take you? And to get the data into the data lake, how big is it? Can you give us some kind of perspective there?
Yeah. So in terms of the time, initially, when I put together, let's call it the data engineering team. We have a more funny name. I called it the big data factory. I don't know why, but that's what we called it. But let's be a bit more professional and call it the data engineering team. When I built this team and have the first, set of pilots, operational pilots that we were building, it took a while, maybe even weeks, sometimes months, to get access to some systems to bring that data into a common environment to do some level of blending. Okay, because in a big company, especially in a pharmaceutical enterprise, you have sometimes data security questions. I'm not even talking about patient information. Just in general, when you say you want to take data from your internal on-premise systems and put it on the cloud, there's more sensitivity in a pharmaceutical company about, is it secure to put the data there? And am I compromising confidentiality, so on and so forth. So initially, it was a bit difficult to get over some of these hoops to make the argument to get the data into a data lake environment. So it was harder. It took weeks and months in the beginning. And then once we have a more mature team, which is the case right now, sometimes we can connect to a system within days and get the data. And if we have the right experts at the table, we can move fairly quickly. So my experience is that it's slow when you start, but don't get discouraged, because it's going to get better over time.
Yeah, it gets more exponential, right? Let's continue, and then we may have time for one more question. And we've got a lot of questions now, Brock, that
That's good.
Maybe we'll answer you and I in a blog post or something, because we've spurred a lot of interest. This looks like your journey for your map, which was many years. Why don't you give us a little bit of insight on this?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to spend the next 30 minutes. I'm going to give you a 2-minute breeze through of this long journey. But the point is, Merck has 3 big sectors, 3 different businesses, if you will. One of them is life sciences, which is based primarily in US. Then we have healthcare, which I just spoke a lot about. And then we have performance materials, where we make liquid crystals that goes on your phone and your TV, so on and so forth. And we took on a cross-divisional effort towards supply chain visibility. Back in 2013, we even had instances where big decisions were made off Excel, which was sometimes very scary. If the master Excel guru left the company, it would have been a very difficult situation. And if the Excel macro broke, which nobody wanted to touch, it was the most holy sacred thing. Nobody ever touched the macro, because if it stops working, we're all in a very difficult situation, right? I think some of us, at least on the webinar, can relate to that. So we went all the way from this Excel-driven business operations to saying, let's look at some of our core KPIs that we need to really get more organized and better at. So we moved from Excel to more of a business warehouse, a data warehouse solution, to then move on to a data lake where we could handle much more data at much bigger scale, perform much more complex queries, and also get into more of the schema on read that you mentioned a few minutes ago. And I think that's a whole different webinar topic altogether on how you're doing blending in this world of schema on read. So maybe we can talk offline about that, Laura. But that's what we did in 2015 for life science and the healthcare sector. And you can see on the top, we're adding these, let's say, KPIs or things that are more important for day-to-day operations. We had all of these KPIs in our ERP systems or in different systems in different parts of the world, but we did not have harmonized one view, one place, single source of truth where we can see what the inventory situation is all over the world. Not in each separate ERP, because a company like Merck, we've acquired many companies. We've been around for 350 years. So we have a variety of ERPs. We have 16 flavors of SAP. It's a very complex situation. Okay. Because of that, we had to put a lot of extra effort to not just achieve visibility into things that are more operational, but achieve it in a way that we could harmonize data from different systems to bring a single source of truth visibility. And since last year and this year, we're moving into more, let's say, advanced things with respect to predictive alerting, using machine learning to improve sales forecast accuracy. We've kicked off a whole bunch of data science and AI pilots, if you will. And now we're really becoming more focused on not answering the question of what's happening in my operations, but more the question of how can we make our operations, our manufacturing and supply chain a competitive advantage as opposed to being a cost center. So this is the sort of 30,000 feet, 2 to 3 minute summary of this journey. But why I shared this slide is that sometimes I feel that as an industry, we could be more honest and forthright in saying we're not doing all the cool, snazzy stuff all the time. We still have basic problems that we're grappling with. Every event, every conference I go to, I feel we owe it to ourselves to be more honest, to not feel ashamed to say, look, part of my business, I'm still running off of Excel and I got to find a way, as opposed to everybody getting together and just talking about the latest development in the latest technology. I think it would be good to see a balance of both. So what this slide is trying to tell you is we started at the very basic and we're building our way to be able to start to do more advanced stuff. This didn't just fall on our lap from nowhere. It took 5 years of patience and humility and step-by-step building this journey to get the awareness and to get the credibility of the supply chain and manufacturing leadership. And now we're starting to go past the tip of the iceberg to make some progress. But even in terms of what we're doing, I feel Merck has a long way to go before we can say we're really market leaders. I think we're getting there, we're making progress, but we still have a long way to go. Make sense?
It does, and thank you so much for sharing your journey. And I'm going to take you up on circling back and maybe doing a blog post to answer the questions we've gotten, because we've gotten a lot of great questions that we don't have time for. I just want to be sure that people know that our next webinar is on driving digital innovation, case studies on digital innovation and what we've learned. So sign up for that. We're getting 300 to 400 people for our webinars. What we're trying to do is really stimulate next level of thinking. We're building up for our Imagine conference, which will be September 4th through the 8th in Philadelphia. And this conference already has 36 signups. We have closed registration for technologists. We're only accepting registration from business leaders. It's about digital innovation. And what we'll be doing is showcasing on the first day cognitive computing, Internet of Things, blockchain case studies. So Barack is an example of a cognitive computing case study, ideating on those. Then the second day, we'll be sharing the research insights that we have from the supply chains to admire and the companies that are really pushing process evolution and the impact on balance sheets. Then we'll move into digital innovation case studies of how companies are transforming their supply chains. And we'll close with what does this mean for organizations, job types, governance, and imagining the supply chain of the future. So this is not a traditional conference, and there are no sponsors. It's not a huge conference. It's 110 people. It's designed for consummate networking. We will be live casting the event as well. So if you don't have funds to attend, you can attend through the live cast and engage on social. Helen will be behind the social. It's our 6th event. And our goal is to really drive supply chain innovation. Barack, thank you so much for joining us today. We will continue to stir up the concepts of the art of the possible through our podcast series, our training, and our webinars. So for people that want to connect more, here are some of the websites and where you can find our research. Ellen, with that, I'm going to take it back to you.
Thanks, Laura, and thank you to everyone that joined today. A few things to share before we wrap up. As I mentioned, we will send out the recording link to everyone on the webinar, so keep an eye out for the follow-up email. We also encourage you to engage with us on social media by following us on Twitter, joining our LinkedIn company page, and following us on SlideShare. You can find this information in the slide deck. Thank you.